At my 60th birthday, my nephew's tribute was a public lynching. My name is Mark, and I turned 60 last month. 60, a milestone that, for most, brings with it a sense of achievement, reflection, perhaps even a quiet pride. For me, it brought the kind of public humiliation usually reserved for reality TV villains, orchestrated by the very people I'd spent decades propping up. The sting of it is still fresh, a raw wound festering beneath a forced calm I've had to adopt. The echoes of their laughter still ring in my ears, a cruel symphony played at my expense. I'm a widower of 5 years now. My wife, Eleanor, was the quiet strength in my life, the one who saw through the BS and nudged me to put myself first to stand my ground. Now, without her, I'm navigating these choppy waters alone. My only remaining close family is my sister, Sarah, and her 2 sons, Ethan, 28, and Caleb, 25. Charming, they are. Utterly charming. And just as utterly entitled. Ethan, the older one, is the smooth talker. Always has been. He's the one with the brilliant business ventures that always manage to fizzle out, leaving him in a deeper hole than before. He's got that slick, salesman charisma, the kind that makes you want to believe him, even when your gut is screaming otherwise. Caleb, the younger, is the struggling artist, perpetually on the verge of his big break, which somehow always requires a substantial injection of cash from yours truly. He's the quiet, brooding type, quick to feign offense or despair when his needs aren't immediately met. Their mother, my sister Sarah, well, she's a master enabler. She'd always play the helpless mother, caught between her son's dreams and my generosity, subtly pushing me to open my wallet. I've always been the family's quiet pillar, the reliable uncle, the dependable son, the one who always had his wallet open. I've probably shelled out more in loans and investments over the years than I ever saved for my own retirement. I took an early retirement recently, a significant life change that left me feeling a bit adrift, but also for the first time in a long time considering what I wanted. So, when Ethan called me last month, bubbling with enthusiasm, proposing a grand 60th birthday bash, I was wary. Uncle Mark, he'd gushed, his voice practically vibrating with feigned excitement. It's your big 6, so we want to throw you the tribute you deserve. Our treat, of course, absolutely no expense spared. Consider it a thank you for everything. I was hesitant, given my newfound financial uncertainty after retiring, but they insisted it was their way of showing appreciation, a genuine gesture of gratitude. A flicker of hope, foolish as it was, ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to mend some of the underlying tension that had always existed beneath the surface of our financial exchanges. Maybe they'd finally grown up. I even bought a new, slightly too expensive watch for the occasion. Pathetic, right? A man at 60, still clinging to the hope of his nephew's genuine affection. The party was at this trendy, somewhat pretentious downtown venue, all exposed brick and industrial chic. Walking in, I noticed the surprisingly large crowd. Not just my usual buddies from the golf club, but many of Sarah's acquaintances, some distant relatives I rarely saw, and even a few former colleagues from work. Sarah herself was there, flitting around, looking a bit too pleased with herself, her eyes darting between me and her sons. I tried to enjoy the initial pleasantries, accepting handshakes and well wishes, but the undercurrent of my nephew's overly enthusiastic smiles started to feel unsettling. My gut churned, a familiar feeling I'd learned to ignore over the years. It was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach their eyes, a glint of something cold and calculating hidden beneath the veneer of celebration. Around 2 hours into the party, just as I was starting to relax, perhaps lulled by the mediocre craft beer and the polite chatter, Ethan tapped a glass with a fork. The clinking sound echoed through the room, cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming with practiced showmanship, "if I could have your attention for a very special tribute to our dear Uncle Mark." The lights in the room dimmed, plunging us into a soft, expectant gloom. A large projector screen descended from the ceiling with a quiet hum, casting a stark rectangle of light onto the wall. I braced myself, a knot forming in my stomach. I expected a sentimental photo montage, perhaps a few embarrassing childhood pictures, the kind of cheesy slideshow people do at milestone birthdays. Oh, how wrong I was. So incredibly, disastrously wrong. The video began with a slick, professionally produced intro. Mark Sullivan, a lifetime of unfulfilled potential. My stomach lurched, a cold dread washing over me. The narration wasn't a single voice, but a spliced-together compilation of past conversations, often taken wildly out of context, featuring my ex-wife, Sarah, and even the nephews themselves. It was designed to dismantle my character piece by agonizing piece. They started with my failed marriage, a soundbite from my ex-wife, distorted and amplified, lamenting my lack of ambition and predictability. Then came my career setbacks, an audio clip of me, years ago, discussing a promotion I'd missed, made it sound like a monumental failure, a testament to my inherent mediocrity. They highlighted my financial misjudgments, a snide clip of Sarah subtly complaining about money she'd lent me, which was in reality money I'd given her when she was facing foreclosure. My hobbies, my quiet passions, were mocked. My modest classic car restoration was dismissed as a sad attempt to relive youth, my quiet evenings reading, a life wasted on dusty old books. The video used damning photos, a broken-down Ford F-150 I'd owned in my 30s, perpetually in need of repairs, a half-finished deck I'd started before Eleanor got sick, and I had to dedicate all my time to her care, an unflattering, candid shot of me from a family picnic, caught mid-chew with a goofy expression. The narration became more cutting, punctuated by pre-recorded laugh tracks that seemed to echo through the room, mingling with the nervous titters of some of the guests. It painted me as a perpetual nice guy who finished last, a spineless enabler, a deadbeat uncle to my own family. It was a character assassination, pure and simple. Then came the really personal gut punch. A particularly jarring clip featured Ethan from a few years ago, saying, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt, "Uncle Mark just needs to get a backbone. He's too soft. That's why he'll always be alone." Caleb then chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yeah, he just needs to be real for once. Stop pretending everything's fine, Uncle. It's embarrassing." The humiliation was absolute, a spotlight on every vulnerability, every moment of self-doubt I'd ever had. The video ended with a dramatic flourish. Ethan and Caleb, now standing before the screen, bathed in the projector's cold glow, their faces etched with a triumphant, sickening smirk, announced, "We've seen what a lifetime of being a Mark gets you. So, we're not just celebrating 60 years of Uncle Mark. We're celebrating the end of our dependency on him. As of today, we're cutting ties." My heart pounded, but I kept my face expressionless. Then came the final cruel twist, and as a final act of responsibility, Ethan continued, his voice ringing with false magnanimity, "We expect him to settle our outstanding debts, as he's always promised." Caleb then stepped forward, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Here's a quick rundown," he announced, rattling off specific, exaggerated figures for loans, money I had given them over the years, framed as their final inheritance from the family ATM. The audacity, the sheer brazen nerve of it was breathtaking. A wave of nervous laughter, punctuated by some genuinely cruel guffaws, swept through the room. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Others, particularly Sarah's friends, outright chuckled. I sat there, frozen, a knot in my stomach the size of a grapefruit. The humiliation was absolute, a spotlight on every vulnerability, every moment of self-doubt. But I didn't explode. I didn't cry. I simply stood up, took a deep breath, and with an almost eerie calm, I looked at Ethan and Caleb, then at the stunned faces of the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "I appreciate your honesty, boys." I turned, walked out of the venue, leaving a stunned silence in my wake, followed by a confused murmur that quickly escalated into a chaotic buzz. I didn't look back. I just kept walking out the door into the cool night air, leaving the laughter and the betrayal behind me. I went completely dark for several days. I turned off my phone, ignored emails, and took leave from work, telling my former colleagues I was dealing with a family emergency. I didn't wallow in self-pity, as I might have done in the past, curling up with a bowl of cereal and replaying every cruel word. Instead, I entered a phase of intense, calculated thinking. The roast wasn't just a cruel joke. It was the final, public act of a long-standing pattern of manipulation and exploitation. This time, however, something snapped inside me. Eleanor's voice, a quiet whisper in my memory, echoed in my mind. Mark, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who don't deserve your kindness. You're not their personal piggy bank or their emotional punching bag. I saw everything clearly now, the years of subtle coercion, the manufactured crises, the endless cycle of giving. I had been a fool, yes, but no longer. Instead of immediately confronting them, which would have been my old pattern, I began to meticulously gather evidence. I remembered a vague conversation Ethan had had years ago about an investment opportunity that sounded too good to be true, a shady real estate venture. I discreetly contacted an old college friend, David, who had transitioned from a sharp corporate lawyer to a formidable private investigator specializing in financial fraud. David, I'd said, my voice flat, I need you to look into some things for me. Nothing illegal, just information about my nephews, specifically their financial dealings and recent activities. He was intrigued by my sudden request for intel, sensing the gravity in my tone. I asked him to investigate Ethan's recent business ventures, suspecting more than just failed businesses, perhaps outright fraud. Then there was Caleb. His struggling artist act had always felt a little too theatrical, a performance designed to elicit sympathy and, more importantly, cash. I reached out to a former neighbor of Caleb's, a chatty woman named Brenda, who had always been fond of me. After a little gentle probing, feigning concern for Caleb's well-being, Brenda spilled the beans. "Oh, honey," she'd said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "That boy lives like a king when he's not asking you for money. Always some new gadget, some fancy trip he's suddenly on. And he had this, art mentor program he was running. Seemed fishy to me, people complaining online. And he was always with this very high-maintenance girl, Tiffany, who he bragged about supporting. Finally, I went through old bank statements, meticulously organized receipts, text messages, and even old paper receipts from decades ago, documenting every loan to Sarah and the nephews. I identified precisely how much was never repaid, how often Sarah subtly pushed for financial aid, often fabricating elaborate sob stories about her own financial woes. It was a staggering sum, far more than I'd ever realized. The truth, laid out in cold, hard numbers, hit me like a physical blow. I realized Sarah was deeply complicit, not just a helpless mother. She was an active participant in their parasitic dance, often facilitating their schemes and even benefiting directly from them. Days passed, blurring into a quiet week. My phone, once silent, began to buzz with increasing frequency. Their calls and texts became frantic, a desperate chorus of manufactured crises. Ethan needed money for his sudden business emergency. His car was facing repossession. His new investment was collapsing. Caleb was threatening eviction from his overpriced loft, blaming unforeseen expenses. They assumed I was just pouting and would eventually cave like always. Sarah called too, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy, playing the concerned sister, subtly pressuring me to be the bigger man and fix things for the boys. Each message, each frantic call, each manipulative plea solidified my resolve. They thought I was weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I finally responded to them, after a week of calculated silence, using a calm, almost apologetic tone, exactly as they expected. "I need to understand where I went wrong," I said to Ethan, my voice carefully modulated to sound defeated, a little shaky. "And I still love you no matter what, despite everything." I suggested a private family dinner to clear the air and discuss the debts they'd so publicly listed. They agreed immediately. So fast, it was almost comical, picking an obscenely expensive Italian restaurant near Ethan's house, a place known for its exorbitant prices and high-end clientele. They clearly assumed I'd pick up the check, as always, a final extravagant gift from their ATM uncle. For the dinner, I intentionally wore an old, wrinkled shirt, didn't bother to shave, and let my hair go a bit wild, projecting a slightly defeated image. It was a calculated move, a performance designed to put them at ease, to make them overconfident. At the fancy Italian restaurant, Ethan and Caleb were positively smug. They ordered the most expensive dishes and wines, their eyes gleaming with avarice. Sarah, draped in a silk scarf, was unctuously sympathetic, giving me fake concerned glances across the table, occasionally patting my hand with a saccharine smile. They recounted their difficulties since the party, their voices filled with self-pity, and reiterated their demands for me to pay, framing it as a familial obligation. "Uncle Mark, we just needed you to face reality," Ethan stated, as if he were my therapist, his voice laced with patronizing superiority. "This is for your own good, so you can finally move on," Caleb added, picking at his lobster linguine, his eyes flitting around the room, making sure everyone saw how he was suffering. They even had the audacity to bring up the honesty of the birthday party, as if they'd done me a favor, a necessary intervention. I calmly listened, occasionally nodding, letting them dig their own holes deeper and deeper, their words confirming every suspicion I had. Inside, a cold rage simmered, but on the surface, I was a picture of weary resignation. After they finished their collective tirade, a silence fell, broken only by the clinking of cutlery from nearby tables. I leaned back in my chair, a small, sad smile playing on my lips. "I understand," I said, my voice quiet but firm, carrying just enough weight to capture their attention. "And I've spent the last week doing some serious soul-searching. I've realized a lot of things. About myself, and about all of you." I reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out a single, laminated printout. It was a bank statement, meticulously highlighted. I slid it across the table to Ethan. "Ethan," I said, my voice clear and steady, "about those business investments you mentioned. My friend David, the PI, uncovered something more specific, like your rather substantial debts to a certain underground sports betting ring, far exceeding what you told your bookie. And the collateral you put up, which happens to be the clear title to your mother's house, signed over without her knowledge." Ethan's face drained of color, his jaw slacked, a piece of pasta halfway to his mouth clattering back onto his plate. Sarah gasped, a small, choked sound escaping her lips. Her eyes darted from Ethan to me, then back to the document, wide with a horror I hadn't seen before. The restaurant began to feel very, very small. I then turned to Caleb. "And Caleb, your struggling artist act is truly impressive." I slid another laminated document across the table. It was a printout of a detailed expose from an online art forum, complete with screenshots. Especially when you've been running a rather lucrative online scam, preying on unsuspecting amateur artists, taking their money for portfolio reviews you never deliver. And the girlfriend you've been secretly supporting, Tiffany, who believes you're a trust fund baby, living off your imaginary success. I believe she's also very interested in the details of your European art tour funds, which appear to have been diverted to a new Porsche lease. Caleb spluttered, his face turning an alarming shade of crimson, unable to form words. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. The restaurant table, once filled with the muted clatter of fine dining, erupted. Sarah, initially furious at Ethan for jeopardizing her home, then spun on Caleb for his deceit, before finally turning her wrath on me, her voice a hissed whisper. "How could you, Mark? Airing our dirty laundry like this? This is family." The nephews were livid, their voices rising in a furious clamor, screaming at me for betraying their family trust and ruining their lives. I remained perfectly calm. "You wanted honesty, boys," I said, my voice rising slightly, cutting through their shouts so everyone at the table could hear clearly. "Here it is. I've paid for your mistakes for too long. No more. The party was a clear message from you. Now this is mine." I then produced the name change papers they had proudly presented at the party, along with a pen. "Consider this your final independence. You want to be on your own? So be it. With a flourish, I signed the papers. "The bill's on you, gentlemen," I added, looking at the stunned faces of my nephews, whose mouths were agape. "Enjoy your new freedom. It's time you truly earned it." I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked out, leaving them in a chaotic public meltdown. The roar of their fury and Sarah's horrified, bewildered cries followed me out the door. It was the best meal I'd ever walked out on. I felt a lightness in my step I hadn't experienced in years. The air outside was cool and clean, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the restaurant. The immediate aftermath was exactly as I'd anticipated, perhaps even more dramatic: utter chaos. The nephews' lives descended into an absolute shambles. Ethan's gambling debts came due with terrifying speed, and the threat of his mother's house being impacted was no longer a distant possibility, but a grim, terrifying reality. His bookie, a rather unsavory character, was making his presence felt, calling Sarah directly, adding a layer of dread to her already unraveling world. Caleb's online scam was not only exposed, but became local news, leading to not only legal threats from angry clients, but also his girlfriend, Tiffany, publicly dumping him and exposing him on every social media platform she could find. Her public condemnation, complete with screenshots of his fraudulent messages, made him a pariah in their social circles. Their phone calls to me were a desperate mix of enraged threats, pathetic pleas, and bewildered cries of "how could you?" Sarah, caught in the middle, still tried to mediate, still unable to fully grasp the depth of her son's deceit, often blaming me for the family drama. "You're breaking this family apart, Mark," she'd scream, conveniently forgetting who started the fracturing. But a few days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Maria, my cousin, who had been at the party. Her voice was firm but empathetic. "Mark," she said, "I'm so sorry about what happened at your party. It was disgusting. And I need to confess something. Caleb also scammed me out of a significant sum, claiming he needed it for art supplies for a major commission. He swore he'd pay me back with interest from his next big sale. And I also have money tied up with Ethan's investments, small compared to yours, but still enough to hurt. He told me it was a sure thing, a way to make a quick buck." My quiet moment of satisfaction swelled. This was it. This was the opening. Maria, a shrewd businesswoman in her own right, offered to provide me with more evidence and collaborate on how to expose them further and recoup some losses. This validated my actions, proving I wasn't just being petty or vindictive, and provided a crucial ally in my corner. "We can do this, Mark," she said, her voice filled with a fierce determination. Together. News of the dinner confrontation, fueled by gossip from other attendees, spread like wildfire through our extended family and social circles. Opinions were sharply divided. Some pitted me, whispering about my character and calling me cold. Others, who had been silently suffering similar manipulative behaviors from the nephews or Sarah for years, began to side with me, offering their own stories of being burned. My old friend Vic, who'd advised me to just cut them loose, called, cheering me on. "Took you long enough, Mark," he chuckled. "But damn, when you finally hit, you hit hard. You're a legend now, old man." And the job front? Well, that also took an unexpected turn. After my early retirement, I'd been considering a few consulting gigs, nothing major. But the newfound clarity and resolve I felt after the roast and subsequent confrontations gave me a fresh perspective. I interviewed for a project manager position at a tech startup, a dynamic, exciting company completely different from my old corporate grind. They saw my decades of experience, my ability to remain calm under pressure, and my clear-headedness. During the interview, when asked about handling difficult situations, I subtly alluded to recent family challenges that had forced me to develop a stronger backbone. I landed the job. It was fulfilling, challenging, and paid exceptionally well. It proved definitively that I was not the failure my nephews had so meticulously painted me to be. The constant barrage of calls, texts, and social media messages from Ethan, Caleb, and Sarah became unbearable. They needed a resolution, not just me ignoring them. They were truly desperate now. So, I called for a formal family meeting. Not at my house, not at theirs. I rented a small, neutral conference room at a local community center, a place of quiet, bureaucratic efficiency. I invited Sarah, Ethan, Caleb, Maria, and my respected Uncle Ben, a retired family court judge who always commanded respect and instilled a sense of order in our family gatherings. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability and setting new, clear terms. When everyone was seated around the polished conference table, the tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Ethan and Caleb looked defeated, their usual bravado replaced by sullen resentment and fear. Sarah wrung her hands, nervously eyeing everyone, her face pale. I began calmly, my voice steady, laying out all the evidence David had gathered. Ethan's extensive gambling records, the legal threats piling up from his bookie, the undeniable proof of Caleb's scam, the emails from angry victims demanding refunds, and the meticulously documented financial trail of every penny I had lent them and Sarah over the years, all detailed in a neat, chronological binder. Uncle Ben, a man of few words but sharp eyes, simply nodded as I spoke, occasionally making a quiet note on his legal pad, his presence a silent, weighty judgment. Maria sat beside me, her expression resolute, ready to back me up if needed. This, I concluded, gesturing to the stack of papers on the table, is the reality. This is the truth you refused to acknowledge for years, the truth you tried to bury beneath lies and public humiliation. You painted me as a failure, a spineless loser, someone you could walk all over. But the real failures are those who live off deceit, who exploit kindness, and who refuse to take responsibility for their own lives. This ends now. I then stated my terms for any future contact or consideration, my voice firm and unwavering, complete honesty. Professional help for your issues, gambling addiction for Ethan, therapy for Caleb to address his manipulative tendencies and lack of empathy, and a commitment to repaying your debts, not to me, but to those you've actually harmed through your own honest efforts. I looked directly at Sarah, whose eyes welled up. And for you, Sarah, the choice is clear. You can continue to enable them and face the full fallout, the loss of your house, the legal repercussions for their actions, or you can finally draw a line, admit your mistakes, and help hold your sons accountable for the very first time in their lives. The meeting ended not with a bang, but a quiet, chilling silence. No immediate resolution, no tearful apologies, no grand reconciliation, but a palpable shift in dynamics. Ethan and Caleb were cornered, unable to deny the overwhelming evidence I'd presented. Sarah, pale and trembling, was forced to confront the full truth of her son's characters and her own role in their downfall. Uncle Ben, at the very end, simply closed his notepad and said, "Mark, you did what needed to be done. It wasn't easy, but it was just." I walked away from that meeting, not with anger, but with a quiet sense of peace and profound vindication. I don't know if Ethan and Caleb will ever truly change. I don't know if Sarah will ever fully understand the depth of her complicity or find the strength to truly change her ways. But I know I have changed. I have finally broken the cycle. The future is uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I feel truly free, truly myself. The failures they broadcast at my birthday party, they were never about me. They were always about them. And now, I'm building my own success on my own terms with my head held high.